Hi, I'm David Thornburg, President and CEO of the Committee of 70, the long-standing civic organization that educates and engages voters in the political process and advocates for better government, better politics in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. We've got an election coming up, primary election on May 21st, where we're going to elect city council candidates, city commissioner candidates, a mayor, and a host of other citywide officials. In our view, running for office is a job interview where the candidates, the applicants have a chance to talk to the voters, the hiring committee, if you will, and make their case as to why they ought to be elected. So in that spirit, we're doing a series of council candidate interviews and joined now by Justin DiBerardinis, who's running for as a Democrat for city council at large, and we're going to spend about 15 minutes talking with him. So welcome, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Committee of 70, for having me.
Great. So like any good job interview, it's a combination of trying to hear your plans, your accomplishments, and then maybe some specifics on a few issues. So let me start with the most basic of questions, which is why are you running? And what would you hope to bring to the people of the city of Philadelphia?
Well, David, I lived my whole life in this city. I was born in the Philadelphia of the 1980s, grew up in the Philadelphia of the 80s and 90s. And in my 37 years, I think this is about the most exciting time I've seen to be at Philadelphia. I grew up in a city that I felt was defined in many respects by its decline. I grew up in a neighborhood where there were less people, less jobs, less physical neighborhood. Your neighborhoods are being demolished in many parts of the city, and I would say less hope. I think that city has changed. This is not a city that's dying. This is a city that, for the first time in generations, is beginning to see new populations, new and sustained growth, beginning to see some economic growth. And I think the fundamental governing questions of this city need to change. I think we have to leave behind a politics of partisanship and division. I think those are the politics of a declining city. I think we now have to find the unifying politics of a city that's growing, and that's to think about what it's growing into. I think this is a major pivot point. I think this is now time for Philadelphia to plan for the future, plan for coming generations, plan for the next century. And I hope to be a part of that process. So I think that's one reason I want to run now. I really want to see the future of this city shaped and discussed and thought about in really broad, open ways, and that we can come to some sort of consensus or vision of the city we want to build over the next 20
So
years.
what's the role of an at-large city council person in trying to push the conversation in that direction?
You know, something I've talked about a lot during this campaign is I think every 50 to 100 years, this city looks at its governing documents. It looks at its charter. It looks at the rules of the road. What's the constitution of this city? What is the government that we think should build going forward? Last time we did that comprehensively was the 1940s and the 1950s. That was another major transition in this city. It was a transition of political party control. It was a transition from the pre-war city to a post-war economy that was building. This mic is not on.
Should we do that again? I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, we were at a major point of transition. I transitioned from a city that was from the pre-war city to the post-war city, transition in political parties. And we looked at government and what it should be and how it should operate and how best it could serve the citizens. I think it's time for that conversation again. Committee of 70 led the way in the 1940s in that conversation, and it led in generations previous. And I think 70 has a huge role to play in having that conversation renewed. I think a spirit of reform is building in the city. I think that a lack of hope and a lack of faith, that's represented in voter turnouts in 15 and 16 and 17% in municipal elections. That tells us that people don't believe in government. It means that they're frustrated with council. It means that they don't trust that the decisions that are being made in the body are really serving the citizens. And I think we need to restart that conversation about how we have a city that is free of prerogatives. I think a conversation about term limits. I think a conversation about fair and open and honest government is needed, and I'm excited to be a part of that conversation.
Good.
There's other things we need to do as well.
We'll get back to that. But just to sort of interpret, so is one part of your thinking that we ought to take a comprehensive look at the city charter and
Absolutely.
not just piecemeal it? We seem to have a ballot initiative every go round that chips away at some obscure aspect of the charter. Is it time to look at the whole thing?
I believe we need a citywide charter convention. That's what I think we need. I think we need a great gathering of the civic and business and community leaders and political leaders of this city to say, if we're going to the studs, if we're writing a fresh document, what do we want to see in this city? Do we still want to see a city where council has individual council members have unilateral control of land use and zoning? Do we want to be a city where variances are needed for every single project that is built? Do we want to be in a city where we have a council that has very weak budgetary oversight of the executive branch? That was one of the major issues when the charter was developed in the 40s and passed in 1950s. There was a question: did council have enough power over the budget of the city? I think these are important questions, and I think it's time to revisit them. I don't think that's the only thing we need to reform. I think another thing we need to reform is the worst municipal tax code in America. I worked in this council. I was the legislative director for Councilwoman Sanchez. I focused on tax policy. These are self-inflicted wounds. I think our structures of governance, I think our structures of taxation, these are the things we've been doing that have held our city back to no good end. I want us to do these reforms. I want us to set the foundation for a prosperous and equitable city. I think if we get these foundations right, we could achieve rare and special things for American cities here in Philadelphia. We have done that before. I think we can do it again.
Good. As I said at the outset, job interviews are a combination of your plans for the future and your reflection on your own accomplishments. So talk about a few things in your career so far that you think have made a difference, a positive difference to the city of Philadelphia or city of Philadelphia neighborhoods. What are the things that you want people to know that you've accomplished so far?
Well, I feel very proud of my 16-year professional history of getting things done in this town. My career started in community organizing. I organized in Kensington, which was where I was born, very close to where I grew up. I grew up in Fishtown. I led the campaign for a new Willard Elementary School. In the early 2000s, that was the most dilapidated and toxic school in the city of Philadelphia. The same issues of lead and asbestos and mold that many of our schools are dealing with, but it was also horribly overcrowded. And it is a very racially mixed school. That's rare in our city, but the work of organizing was of bringing Black and Latino and white families together to understand that they had a common cause in getting the school that their children deserved built. I was proud to lead that campaign. I was proud to get a new Willard school built. I was proud to work for an independent and reform-minded councilwoman, Maria Quinones Sanchez. We passed a lot of bills that I think moved this city forward in a lot of ways around redistricting and gerrymandering, around progressive tax policies. For the last 6 years, I've been leading the program at Bartram's Garden, Southwest Philadelphia. I think we've built one of the best parks in the city. It's drawing national attention and national resources to a community that really badly needs a park of that quality. A focus of our work at Bartram's has been job training for young people. I have 50 teenagers from Bartram's High School who have jobs at that garden. They are working one of the best urban farms in America. They are growing 20,000 pounds of organic produce for their community. We have over 30 employees. We are building a pipeline to employment in that neighborhood. I believe that's what every public institution, school, park, library should be doing in this city. It should be preparing our youth for professional opportunities and for the economy that we are growing, and it should be creating living wage job opportunities for the communities that need them. I think my track record is my platform. The things that I've worked on are the things I want to do in City Hall. I've had some real success in the places I've done it, and I think I can have success in that building.
Yeah. So one of the challenges as one of 17 city council people, particularly as an at-large council person, is to build the caucus, to build the votes that you need to move a piece of legislation. At the end of the day, you need 9 votes. The mayor's conscious of that. So city council is not just a debating organization. You have to be able to organize effectively. If you're trying to drive change, if you're trying to get the votes for a comprehensive look at the city charter, you got to get to 9. Mm-hmm. So just talk to me about your experience and how it relates to your ability to pull something like that off.
Well, I worked in council, and I was a part of passing some really tough bills. And usually, when a bill got passed, it was because an unusual coalition formed. Bill Green and Councilwoman Sanchez had very different backgrounds, in many ways had different political philosophies, but I think the business tax reform legislation that we passed was a result of people with different backgrounds and different beliefs finding common cause to move this city forward. I think that has been demonstrated in all the stops in my career. I think that's what organizing work is at its foundation, is building new coalitions, mm-hmm. New coalitions that there's new will and new power to achieve new outcomes. That's the kind of headset and experience that I want to bring to council. I think this is also a period where we have elected a lot of new council members over the last couple cycles. We may be reaching a tipping point. We may be at a time where things that previously we had thought weren't possible are going to become possible. We will elect at least 2 new council members this cycle, and maybe more. I think that tipping point could be near. But fundamentally, when I talk about reform of council, I don't know that our structure of governance has been a good deal for council. I think that's what I talk about. I don't think my conversation is about how we have a weaker council or a less powerful council. I think it's about having a council with the right powers. I'd love to take council members to see some other cities in America, see how city councils in New York or Baltimore are functioning.
Chicago?
See, or well, maybe not Chicago, but I think we can look at cities where there are councils that have strong oversight powers, where there's real checks and balances. And I think if we saw that, maybe we wouldn't feel so afraid to give up parochial powers of prerogative or parochial powers around variances if we saw that we'd have a stronger and more properly powered legislative branch. I think it's not just a conversation about council. I think it's a conversation about the balance of power between the executive and the legislature. And that's the conversation we're not having. I think it'll be a better deal for council and a better deal for the citizens of Philadelphia if we get it right.
Good enough. Let me dive into the last bucket of issues. We
Sure.
sort of touched on them earlier, but in our view, there's sort of a pervasive sense out there of frustration with the way City Hall works, not just the people in the building and the processes in the building, but the politics that put them there. The lack of transparency, you mentioned councilmanic prerogative, the way we run elections. I'm sure it's dawned on you that with 50 some candidates, I think, for council at large, with no runoff provisions, this feels like kind of a silly way to run elections if we're trying to get to some sense of consensus, that we don't let independents voters vote in primary elections, transparency in the processes of council. So, we've put out what we're calling Philadelphia Resolution 1 as sort of a starting point for what we think is necessary to drive those kinds of things. But what do you think about? What do you care about? What do you think we ought to focus on?
I think these are all important reforms. And for me, I do not believe this current system of governance is delivering for the people. And I think the proof is in the pudding when you look at who's showing up to vote. I think for me, that is the people saying that they don't believe this body is serving the needs of their community or is operating in an open and transparent way that they can trust. Therefore, they don't want to invest their time to go to the ballot box and to cast a vote. That is a real problem. It harms us not just in our city, but it harms us in our representation in Harrisburg and in Washington, D.C. I think it is a trust and a faith in government that needs to be rebuilt. I believe to get there, a charter convention, to take this document to the studs, to imagine the government that we want to lead this city forward. I don't think legislators should be involved in the drawing of district boundaries. I don't think that elected officials should be involved in the overseeing of elections. I don't believe that being elected to council should be a lifetime position. I don't believe that a bike lane should stop or start at a legislative boundary. I don't believe that an individual actor should have the ability to decide whether a parcel is zoned for a row home or a skyscraper. These are not modern, effective, or transparent systems of governance. I think the citizens of this city know it. I think many of the politicians of this city know it. And I think we need to do the hard work to begin the conversation. This is multi-year work. This isn't about planning for tomorrow. This is about planning for the next 30, 40, 50 years. We need to do the hard work to have that conversation, to build a new coalition for reform, and to do the hard work to get that passed, and to elect a mayor who's probably running on a platform of reform. That's what it took in the past. I think that's what it's going to take going forward. I want to be a part of doing the hard work to get us there.
Great. Thank you. I think that's about puts a wrap on our discussion, our job interview with Justin DiBerardinis. Thanks to you for joining us. A couple other thanks to the Thomas Skelton Harrison Foundation for providing the support to do this and other activities around the upcoming primary. Hope you found this useful. If you want to dive in deeper on candidates and elections coming up on May 21st, take a look at our voter guide, which you can find at 70.org, SEVENTY.org. Or if you want to make things really easy on yourself, you can download our We Vote app, which enables you to hold in the palm of your hand a whole suite of tools that you can use to figure out who you're going to vote for. Take that with you to the polls, share it with your friends, and turn yourself into what we hope is a super voter and a super citizen. So thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for other conversations as we march through the ranks of city council candidates, and talk soon.
Thank you.